it's always a pleasure to have your efforts recognized. But maybe that's where I should start to say that when it comes to the fight against corruption, it's quite a rarity, and therefore you should count yourself quite, privileged to receive that honor. Otherwise, the other bit that usually accompanies those who fight is the uncertainties around your safety. But I think the overall reward for engaging in the fight against corruption is the investment we make in the current and the future of our society, the future of our children, that they can live in a society that is better than we are in at the moment. I know I have about 10-15 minutes in order to make my remarks, and I'll try and stick to those 15 minutes. But first, let me just introduce Africa's Voices, which is the organization that I work for currently. And because I have seen a lot of convergence between what many of you are doing and what Africa's Voices does and stands for. At Africa's Voices, we create platforms of engagement between policymakers, leaders, and the citizens. And we do this using a combination of radio or mass media broadcast, primarily radio. We combine that with the SMS shortcodes, where we ask citizens to respond to questions or give their views on a topic of interaction that is going on in a radio show. And then we harness that and analyze the data using the conventional social science analysis methods to pretty much understand what citizens are thinking about a particular topic. So you might want to see it as a research product, but we see it primarily as a governance space because it creates platforms for engagement. So you must think about it as the taking from the physical space, the town hall meetings, the church meetings, and similar physical meetings into the mass media space, where you amplify the number of people who can participate in a conversation and have their data analyzed. Having done that, I think the subject that brings us here today is one of corruption. And it's not a surprise that we are concerned about corruption today in this country. And for apologies to those who are not based in Kenya, because most of my perspectives will be based on the Kenyan experience, even though my remarks can be applied generally across the board. If you think about corruption as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain, then you must immediately realize that this country and Africa generally has a problem of corruption, and a big one at that. This problem has grown in leaps and bounds since the colonial times, through independence to today, when you can say on average, many African countries have been independent for close to 50 years or thereabouts. So for 50 years, we have seen this grow to a level where now it threatens our very existence as nations, as states, and undermines fundamentally our ability as a continent to progress and meet the basic necessities of our people. I will reflect a bit on what I see the youth doing and what they could do in the fight against corruption. And there's hardly anything new that I will say beyond what has been said by many of you who have spoken here before. The first point to make, of course, regarding the youth is that you are the majority. The youth in Kenya, in East Africa, in the African continent are actually the majority. And they are the majority by an overwhelming number. So those who are 35 years and below, whichever way you go, through a vote, through any count, they are the majority. So what that means is that those who are in the minority, like myself, in a context that involves numbers, we are completely outnumbered. We stand no chance whatsoever. Now, what does that mean for our societies? What it means is that the citizen, the youth, really have to take their prime of place in the management of our affairs. And not just in the management of our affairs, but in the agitation for better governance. You have the numbers, you have the stake, you clearly have the highest stake in a well-governed society. In any case, you have longer to live than me and those who are in the minority space. So the current and the future pretty much belongs to you, and you must play your role in shaping it. I think secondly, unlike our generation and the generations before, you are imbued with knowledge and intellect that many of us didn't quite get through education. So there were people who have gone before us who they didn't have the chances that you have today. You also have technology on your side, and you have the falling down of the boundaries and the collapsing of the world into a global village to your advantage, which means you can connect in ways that my generation and the generations before were not able to do that. And then I would say you are the least invested in corruption and other societal ills. This is not to say that you don't have youth who are corrupt. They are there. But what I know is that the track record, even of those who engage in corruption, the youth, is very short compared to those who are on the other side of the divide. And you have the least interest in maintaining the status quo. I think the future is more for you than the past. So you must contend for that future that is driven by values and good governance. You also have the energy and the time and the headspace to engage in corruption activities. And to your benefit, you have you are more receptive to social change and political transformation. But having said that, let me just get a few things out of the way, because I have listened to a number of people, youth and non-youth, speak about the place of youth. And the first thing is to confuse youth with innocence and integrity. I think there's nothing that can be far from the truth, even though I have just said that even those who are corrupt, they have a shorter track record than anyone else. I'll be the one to admit that questions of integrity are questions of values and a value system, as opposed to youth, which is a function of age and the passage of time. The age and the passage of time in and of itself cannot be the asset that you have when it comes to the fight against corruption. So you must deliberately then turn the benefit of your youth into a quest for advocating for better governance and a value system that you can be proud of. Having said that, I think I have seen the many things that people are doing, and I've listened to the excellent work that is being done by youth who have spoken or posted on the chat. There's clearly agitation on the part of the youth. There's an increase, youth are increasingly speaking about corruption. But I dare propose that you can actually do more than you are doing at the moment. And why do I say that? When I talk about the numbers that you command, it is a pity that we still have the problems that we are having today in the society, because you have the capacity to change that. But for you to do that, you need to work together, you need to reach out to one another, and you need to act in solidarity with one another. And you need to be courageous. I know that that subject has been mentioned a few minutes ago, but you'll never get anything done unless you have the courage to do it. And in terms of the courage, someone said that you can never discover new islands until you have the courage to lose the sight of shore. And I know that the threats that are always used are against personal harm or harm against people who are close to you, arrests and so on and so forth. But I can assure you those should not be any discouragement whatsoever. And if you find yourself in the crosshairs of our system, chances are that you're doing something that is impactful. So get going with it, but don't go in it alone. Reach out to others so that people know when you get into trouble, and their solidarity can get you out of trouble. I say this because today I just saw that a couple of young people have been convicted for agitating for a piece of land that is clearly belongs to a police post in Kitengela. And these young ones have actually been convicted and will have been a fine of, I think, 50,000 has been imposed against them. And in the absence of that, I think 3 years imprisonment. I think it's a small price to pay. And I do know that the Kenyan youth and the Kenyan people will rally around these people and pay that, even as the legal battles to ensure that we protect the integrity of our public spaces continues. I think we've also heard of denunciations, which must then, the voices must be louder than before. Again, using the technology that I have just mentioned, you can be heard far and wide, and do not underestimate your voice. And when you see the youth acting in an issue, whether it is the Kitengela land or whatever other issue they have to be agitating against, add your voice to it. It might be a tweet, it might be a post that you make via video, it might be that you contribute some money, 100 shillings, 50 shillings, 1,000 here and there to support colleagues in agitating for change, but be counted among the numbers. But also provide information. I think I did hear also a number here talking about how they have gone about accessing information in the counties and how financial resources are managed, and use that information to agitate for accountability. That is excellent. And again, we can do more, because one of the things that you realize is in deficit in this country is the truth, and particularly official truth. You know, information about how money is spent, who is employed in what position, and on what merit, are struggles that we will continue to experience, particularly because we've come from a history of Official Secrets Act, where everything that is done in the name of government is secret, where newspapers would be stamped confidential, secret and confidential, and you will not be able to access it, even if you are the one who brought it from the streets. So that is a bit of an extreme example I'm giving, not fiction, actually a reality, but then it colors the way information is provided in this country. Granted that we have an Access to Information Act, granted that we have a constitution that provides for access to information, we do know that the space for accessing information is pretty difficult, and we have to continue pushing for access to information, and we have to continue using the information we access to package it in a way that it translates into knowledge, and knowledge in action for the masses in this country, not just the youth, but also other segments and sectors of the society. So providing information becomes very important. But as you realize, information in and of itself is not enough. You need to use that information to mobilize the masses, mobilize your fellow youth and the masses against corruption. There is no one, I am yet to see people who will stand up in a podium, even our politicians and those who engage in corruption, the high priests of corruption in this country. None will stand up and say that corruption is good. In any case, they stand up to say that they don't support corruption, because they do know that that is the way it should be. But we must hold them to account when they say this and still continue to engage in corruption. I know that the youth in this country, in the region, on the continent, and globally, have used some tools to try and mobilize and inform each other. You know, you have integrity camps, or democracy camps for that matter. You have summer schools that teach the knowledge and the mechanics of anti-corruption. We've developed the curriculums to educate people and students within the school system about corruption. We've also even set up integrity clubs in many learning institutions. There are many awareness raising campaigns that we have engaged in that have targeted, you know, young people and people who are in school. But that in of itself is not enough. We need to, and I'm just now concluding, noting, of course, that I don't have much time left. But in terms of what needs to be done going forward, I want to basically say that one of the issues that I find most important for us to engage with is the question of the debt question. The debt question is an important one that we need to engage with. There is a lot of misinformation about the debt in this country. Anyone in government today will tell you we are within our borrowing limits and we are not anywhere near busting it. But is that the truth? You know, we must not take anything we are told as face value. We must invest the knowledge and the intellect that we have and the tools that we can develop to analyze this information, generate knowledge that is objective and shared with the public. And I challenge you to, for those who can, to take time and look at our debt question. And I can tell you that in my previous position as Executive Director of Transparency International Kenya, I raised the question of debt about 6 years ago. At that point in time, the levels of debt we were almost at half of where we are today. And at that point, it never gained traction. Over the years, it's gaining traction, but still, there are many who will not see the relationship between the debt, the university fees crisis that we are experiencing today, the fuel costs that we are experiencing now, the high cost of living that is escalating as we move on, and the very hard economic times that are going to be experienced now in the future. In fact, the next couple of years are going to be quite difficult for this country. And the youth will have less and less opportunities than I got and many people in my generation got. And in fact, those who are coming after you will have less opportunities because the cost of or the premium that you get through good governance has diminished over time. And what we are getting are losses, basically deficits that translate into less education subsidies, fewer access to education loans, poor access to medical services, and so on and so forth. And I think many people and our leaders today will tell you about our infrastructure. And infrastructure is good. And it must, however, it must be done within the limits of what we can afford at any one particular time. And this is not really to criticize the infrastructure projects that have been done. I think we have an infrastructure deficit that needs to be plugged, not just in Kenya, but across East Africa and Africa as a whole. There is a lot that needs to be done. But how long or within what timeframes can we do it without putting into jeopardy our own existence as going concerns, if I may use that phrase borrowed from the private sector. It's also been said that you need to mobilize for leaders of integrity in the next elections. And I want to give you a specific charge in this. If next year, in September, you wake up and find yourself with leaders who have distinguished themselves in theft of public resources, leaders who have cases pending in court, leaders who have cases may not even be, theft of money, but even rape cases, criminal cases, then I think we will not escape blame. Because again, you've remembered, I have told you that the numbers you have are such that you can transform this country, but you need to synergize and reach out to one another. And you might ask me, does that mean that we have to have uniform thoughts? I would say no. Should we belong to one political party? I would say no. But we can agree on minimums as the youth and say that for anyone who comes seeking our vote, whether it is on party A, party B, or party Z, they must meet this minimum criteria. And let me just tell you what that criteria might be. I think anyone who has ongoing cases in the courts is not qualified for election. And I think this is a position that I have articulated over and over again. The politicians don't agree because they think that it's too high a standard. And I'd like to tell you, in case you believe them, that you are wrong. Anyone who has not been convicted of an offense does not mean they are people of integrity. It simply means that the courts have not found them guilty of any offense. But remember, we are not looking to apportion guilt or innocence, because that is the preserve of criminal law. And the purpose of criminal law is to apportion, guilt and innocence for purposes of punishment. And I think that is important. When it comes to leadership, we can never use that same standard to say that if you have not been convicted, even if you have 1,000 criminal cases against you, then you are a person of integrity. Na wewe ni mweupe kama pamba. I think we must shun that thinking, and I would like to charge you to popularize that thought, because it's the right thought, it's the right thing to do. But our politicians are very good at gatekeeping to make sure that new values do not seep into our society and they can continue benefiting. And here I want to tell you something that I was told to my face in 2011 when we were putting together the Leadership and Integrity Act. And I was told by a member of parliament, there is no way we are going to pass a law that is going to be an obstacle to us ascending to or defending our seats in the next election. We are happy to approve this law, but we will put the effective date beyond the next election. And that has been the case over and over again. And even where those laws have passed, they have been weakened so that they don't become a threat to those who seek to defend their seats and those outside there of questionable integrity who want to come in. And this has been enabled partly because good people like you and me have also shied away from seeking political office. And I want to challenge you again. Youth is not a disability in any way. You must present yourself for election. And I know you will ask me, where do I get the resources to do it? I can tell you that this country has a history of, people who have sought, positions of responsibility or elective positions without having the amount of monies many others have, and they have succeeded. So if you have your ideas and you can communicate the people well, then you don't have to shy away because of the way we have monetized our elections. I think the other bit is really to implore us to promote the values that we so desire and to live by those values so that we lead by example. And also to create platforms for harnessing your voices, and to use outputs to influence practice, policy, and legislation. And this is where certainly many of you can partner with us at this. That said, I hold this very firm belief that we can roll the tide against corruption in this country and on this continent, and we can see change and transformative change in my lifetime and in your lifetime. So I do not think that it is an impossibility, but I think we must roll up our sleeves and be unselfish in pursuit of a better country. Let me conclude by some reflection on our, the fight against colonialism in this country, because I do not see the fight against corruption as any different from the fight against colonialism in this country. And if you remember the people who took up arms to go into the forest to fight for the independence of a country, the Land and Freedom Army, those were youth, most likely in your age or less. They didn't have much. They suffer the same incapacities that you still suffer today. They were outnumbered. You are not outnumbered, but they were outnumbered in terms of the troops that they were up against. And the weapons that they had were nothing compared to what the colonialists had. But they had the resolve, and justice was on their side. Remember the old saying that the arc of history is long, but it tends towards justice? I think that is the inspiration we must continue to get. And if you feel that you waver and you are inadequate, you must ask yourself, what did the likes of Dedan and Kimathi have in their hands to become the freedom fighters that they became? That is the challenge that I leave with you this evening. Have a good evening. Thank you.